Good morning. It is 6:37 a.m. on Monday, July 9th, 2018. I'm Christiana Ellis, and this is 5 More Minutes. So, I consumed a variety of media over the weekend, and it's interesting now that I'm doing a rewatch on both Saturday and Sunday now. It means that some of the other things that I'm doing stack up. So now I'm prepared to talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp and the comedy special Nanette and season 2 of Take My Wife and season 2 of Glow. I could I could spread those out, I suppose, but I think instead I'll give kind of just quick summary versions of each of those, and no spoilers generally. Um, so first, Ant-Man and the Wasp. I liked it. I will say that I think it maybe errs on the side of being a little too much going on. And occasionally what that means is that individual elements of what's going on kind of get short shrift. There's just a lot happening and we're not able to explore any of it as deeply. And occasionally what that means is that major stuff is happening and we sort of feel like I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to feel about this. And, we have to kind of have an entire major character be based on like a 30-second voiceover to a montage, and then we just kind of have to say, okay, well, that's what drives this whole character and affects what decisions she's making, and so those are complaints, sure. But what I will say is, even with those complaints, the stuff that's good is very good, and I like Paul Rudd, I like Evangeline Lilly, I like Michael Douglas, I like Michael Pena, I like Lawrence Fishburne, and I did not look up the name of the actress who plays the new villain character, Ghost. Um, but basically, I like the cast. I like a lot of the action. It's a very funny movie. There's a lot of inventive stuff happening. There's a lot to like, and so I definitely enjoyed it, even though I feel like it's a little too much. In terms of not that I don't think there's really any such thing as a perfect movie because every movie's trying to do something a little different. But I will say that I think part of what it tried to do is not 100% successful. In any event, I like it. Definitely worth seeing. What next was the? Oh, there's a comedy special on Netflix that a lot of people have been talking about online called Nanette. And I'm suddenly blanking on the comedian's name, Hannah something. And yeah, so I could look that up, but it's first thing in the morning. So, uh, Nanette is a bit like Cameron Esposito's recent rape jokes special, in that it definitely contains stand-up comedy, but it also takes portions of its runtime to talk about like really serious stuff in a not funny way, in a not comedic way. And in particular, I think the reason people are talking about Nanette a lot is because she not only gets at the core of some of the things that make her like actually angry instead of just like, oh, hey, this is a terrible thing, haha. More like, maybe this is something we really ought not to joke about, and the comedy instinct to take our pain and try to express it as a joke is not healthy. And that's an interesting like commentary, especially as something to bring up in a comedy special. Um, I I think that she made some really good points about it, but I think she maybe also oversells that point a little bit. I mean, she's making the point for herself, and so, maybe that's exactly what it is for her, but I think that she kind of goes beyond what I maybe agree with in terms of the idea that uh, so I guess I don't want to overstate what she says either. I think it's worth watching. It's definitely a different perspective on some of the ways that we see comedians dealing with their own trauma. And in particular, one of the things that really resonates is talking about how she tells a coming out story where she comes out to her mother as lesbian, and the reaction is kind of negative in sort of a jokey way. But what she comes back to later is to say, my mom eventually came around, and we have a very good relationship now. But that's not funny. And so instead, I tell the funny version where she broke my heart and made me hate myself. And then I tell that story over and over, and it becomes part of my own memory of my relationship with my mother. And it's like, oh, yeah, gosh, you could kind of see how that's maybe not healthy. That said, I think being able to process your emotions into and to find the humor in something that was painful at the time is not necessarily an unhelpful instinct. It's more, I think, a behavior that can potentially be unhealthy. Anyway, it's very interesting. It's definitely funny in parts, and it's funny in the parts where it's trying to be funny. Um, a another show with comedians. I mentioned Cameron Esposito earlier. Her TV show that she does with her wife, Rhea Butcher, is called Take My Wife, and it was originally on CISO, but then when CISO went away, it was unclear for a while where season 2 was going to go, but it was eventually made available on things like iTunes and Stars now, and so I hadn't gotten around to watching season 2, even though I was very glad that it was made available. And I kind of, I think, put it off for a long time because I was sort of saving it, maybe. Boy, my voice is a little wonky today. Kind of saving it. And I finally watched it over the weekend, and it was great. And I love it. And it's a great show, and I think a big part of what's great about it is that there's just really not any other TV show out there doing what it does. I mean, it focuses on the day-to-day dramas of a lesbian couple where they both work as stand-up comics, and it's a fictionalized version of their real life, and it feels fresh. It's just like, oh, this feels different. Like, there's, in a lot of senses, this is, basic sitcom material, but it feels different because it's from a different POV. And I think it's adorable. Then I also watched Glow season 2, which I think Glow is a very good show, and this is on Netflix. And season 2, I think my only real complaint about it is that I think one of the potential hazard areas for that show is the fact that several of the wrestlers play offensive character stereotypes, and the show is aware of that, but has a little bit of a hard time dealing with the characters that for whom that is the biggest deal, like including the character who's playing like a Middle Eastern terrorist stereotype and hates it. And so several of the characters trying to find ways to break out of that this time. But I feel like that the show, because it's still trying to be, it's trying to not be about that, and so it occasionally edges towards some sort of a real resolution of that, and then kind of backs away from it without really resolving it. And I think that that's maybe not, that feels a little unsatisfying. But by and large, I think that the show is great. The characters are good, and the writing is good, and it takes several characters and makes them sympathetic and then unsympathetic and then sympathetic again, and it's a good drama. I like it. And so that's all the stuff I'm going to talk about this morning. It's already longer than a normal 5 more minutes because I chose to talk about all those things instead of just one. But I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.